we go. All right. Nancy Reddy is the author of poetry collections Pocket Universe and Double Jinx, and co-editor of the long devotion Poets Writing Motherhood. Her first book of narrative nonfiction, The Good Mother Myth, is forthcoming with St. Martin's Press. Her essays have appeared in Slate, Poets and Writers, Romper, The Millions, and elsewhere. The recipient of grants from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and the Sustainable Arts Foundation, she teaches writing at Stockton University. She writes the newsletter, Write More, Be Less Careful. And if you have social media stuff you want us to subscribe to or take a look at, feel free to pop that in the chat. So yeah, welcome. And I'll turn that over to Nancy.
Hi, I'm so glad you all are here. Like I said, I see some people that I know and lots I don't, which is always exciting. So the focus of today's session is on techniques for creative research, and especially around like filling in gaps. We so often are told to write what you know, which I think can be a good starting point. But I think pretty quickly in writing, we run up against things that maybe you don't remember, maybe things that you don't have access to in as much detail as you want, or just things that you can't know, right? Because you got like a little snippet of a story, at least two people here are writing about their moms, right? You have a snippet of a story, and maybe you're never going to get the full story. So what do you do then? So our idea is to, like I said, I have some slides and I'll pop them in the chat again in a minute if you want to follow them along. But I also wanted you to have stuff to take with you. We will try out a couple of different things today, but you'll also have a bunch of different techniques that you can take with you. I'm drawn to this topic, I would just say, because in my own writing, I'm really interested in how research can like enrich personal memories, enrich our accounts of personal experience. I have a couple of examples of poems and things that are linked in the slides, and that's something that's been really important with my last poetry book, and then also with the nonfiction book that I'm working on right now, which is very much a researched book. So I am going to share slides. I can see that some folks are in the slides already, which is great. All right, hopefully you can see that. Does that work better? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So in the next hour, we have three different ways of thinking about writing what we don't know or we can't remember. So the idea of retrieval, getting the things that are in our brain, but maybe not like at the top of our memory. And then also research, ways to actually go back and get more things. And then for stuff that we just can't know, stuff that we're not going to be able to get access to, two different techniques that come from nonfiction writers, the idea of perhapsing and split toning. So to get us started, I want us to think about a couple of moments related to something you're working on or something you're thinking about. And I think it's really helpful to think about both place and time. And these might be things from your own memory. The first and the third bullet there are things from my own life. The book that I'm working on now is set in Madison, Wisconsin, in like 2013 to 2015, which is not so long ago, but it's definitely long enough ago that I've forgotten some of the texture and I've had to do research to just like recreate that moment. I grew up in suburban Pittsburgh in the early 90s. And then Bradford is a small town in north central Pennsylvania. I don't know if anybody knows it, but it's where my grandmother lived and where my mother grew up in the 50s. And that's something that I've been thinking about too, and trying to think like, how do I write about those stories with enough texture and detail? So I'll give you a minute to make a list of moments, things that you are thinking about and working on. And we'll use this list of moments as a kind of menu as we're working on some writing over the course of the rest of our time. So we're going to start with retrieval. This is an exercise that I really love from Linda Berry, who's a really wonderful like writing teacher, graphic memoirist. If folks are familiar with her, if you're not, I just think she's incredible. So this is a technique. We'll watch this video and she'll talk about what to do. And I found it like, it always feels like magic to me. Like somehow it pulls things out of my brain that I did not know were in there. There's just something like hypnotic about her voice and her whole way of doing things that just like somehow pulls up magical things for me. I linked a poem there that came out of that exercise in case you're interested in seeing it. So what I want you to do before we get started with Linda Berry's exercise is to make a list of images that haunt you. And by haunt, I mean things like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like scary or horrible. It really doesn't. But like something that you just like keep thinking about or kind of keep coming back to. I describe it here as like the kind of memory that feels like it's lodged in the corner of your eye, like a little thing where you're like, did that happen? Did that really happen? And it's okay if it's a memory that you know is like not a real memory. I have a very distinct memory of the house that my mother grew up in, her bedroom, of there being a taxidermied polar bear in the corner of the room one time when I was there and I like couldn't fall asleep because a polar bear was in the room with me. That obviously did not happen. In one part, it was a very small room. There was like barely room for a twin bed, much less an entire taxidermied polar bear. But the memory of that is real. So maybe you have memories like that too, that you know, like it's not a real memory, but you can still write about it because it's meaningful if it's stuck in your brain somewhere. So make a list of images you might work with. In just a minute, I'm going to click over to a Linda Berry YouTube video. It's 16 minutes in total. She calls it 9 minutes of writing because she's going to set us up with a whole bunch of questions that will kind of like get your mind and get your memory back into the space. What you're going to want to do before we do that, I would say write your image or your like thing up at the top. So I'm going to write polar bear up at the top of your notebook. Then she always has you draw a big X through the middle of your paper. And the thinking there is that like you've already ruined your paper. So you don't have to worry about whether your writing is good enough or not. Like you don't have to try to make anything be beautiful or special or precise. I find that very freeing. So you're going to use that paper. She's going to ask a whole bunch of questions. And at first you're just kind of like put your brain back there. She's going to ask us to draw a spiral as a way of, like occupying your mind. I always just draw like a little spiral. You can start again, just like a little spiral. And it's not, the directions there are not super important, but I do think there's something about having your pen moving while your mind is going back. So we will do a little bit of writing. Linda Berry.
Okay, what it is, class. So you already have the image that you're going to work with. You've written at the top of a clean sheet of paper and you've drawn your X. And I'd like you to imagine yourself in this image, but at the same time, I'd like you to work on a spiral on a separate sheet of paper. So go ahead and start your spiral. While you're working on your spiral, give a lot of awareness to the tip top of your head, the center of your forehead, your eyebrows, your temples, the back of your neck, back of your skull, your jaw, your lips, your throat, your shoulders, your shoulder blades, your sternum, your ribs, all the way down your spine to the base of your spine, your belly, your hips, your thighs, your knees, your shins, your calves, your ankles, soles of your feet, back up to your shoulders, and really relax all the way down to your fingertips, your upper arms to your fingertips, elbows, your forearms, your wrists, your hands. Really relax your hands while you're working on your spiral. You're sitting here with us, but you're also out walking in a field at dawn. You are yourself the animal we hunt when you come with us on the hunt. You're in your body like a plant is solid in the ground, yet you're wind. You're the diver's clothes lying empty on the beach. You're the fish. In the ocean are many bright strands and many dark strands, like veins that are seen when a wing is lifted up. Your hidden self is blood in those veins that are like lute strings that play ocean music, not the sad edge of surf, but the sound of no shore. So picture this image that you're about to work with, and write your answers down on your X page. Where are you? Where are you in this image? Where is this taking place? About what time of day or night does it seem to be in this image? And what makes you be able to say that? And what season does it seem to be? And what are some of the clues to that, things that you can see that let you know what season it is? Where's the light coming from in this image? What's the source of light? It's coming through the windows, from a ceiling fixture. Where's the light coming from? What kind of light is it? How would you describe this kind of light? What are you doing? What are you doing in this image right now? What's the temperature like? And what's the air smell like in this image? What are some of the things you can smell? Is there anyone else in this image with you? If so, who? Why are you there? What are some of the sounds that you can hear in this image? What are some of the things that you can hear? And what are some of the things around you? What are some of the things that you can see in this image when you look around? What's directly in front of you? And if you're going to turn and look to your left, what's in that direction? What's to your right? What's behind you? What's around and below your feet? And what's above your head? All right. When you're ready, turning to a clean sheet of paper, you'll have 9 minutes to write about this image, beginning with the words you're supposed to begin with. Okay, 9 minutes. Starting now. About 3 more minutes. About another minute. Starting to wrap up. Concluding the sentence or phrase that you're working on. Coming back together.
I'd love to know how that went. I feel like that always, it just like pulls up things for me that I didn't know were there. And I think
Okay,
sometimes
what it
maybe
is, class.
especially,
So you already have the image.
sometimes maybe especially memories that things I want to write about, but I feel like I can't access like enough detail or like enough richness to really get it to go. And I find that that exercise for me at least feels like a renewable resource. Like every time I do it, it still works for me somehow. Um, so I would love, and I'll stop sharing for just a second so that we can see each other a little better. I would love to know anything that like uncovered for you. You're welcome to unmute yourself and talk or put it in the chat if there were if there was a particular detail or image or something that you got out of doing that, or if you just have a reflection more generally on how that went.
I loved it, and I loved her, you know. I've never, I don't know her work. I've never seen her face, but she seems just like such a powerhouse.
Right? Isn't she? I love in that recording, which I kind of had forgotten, that you can like hear the animals in the background. It's just this like very human thing somehow. Yeah, she has lots more. So she has a book syllabus. She also has a book called What It Is, I think. I mean, she's got a lot of books, but if you like that, I think you would like her.
I think it's a great exercise to bring those details out. So I've had this one image which literally has haunted me, or not literally, but is one of those things that won't go away and wants to be written about. But I think sometimes with something like that, it's what's central to the image that's, sort of burned in your memory, but everything else in the surround is gone. But when you walk yourself through this question by question, it sort of, I don't know, it just comes to the surface in a, at least for me, it was more visual than anything. So that was very, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I always find those questions really helpful. Like, what's in front of you? What's behind you? What time of day is it? Somehow that kind of like, in your mind looking around, always really helps me to get things I didn't know were in there somewhere.
Well, I felt that, I mean, I thought it was interesting. I also felt that when she was asking the questions at the beginning, there were some things I didn't remember. So I just was like, well, maybe there was this, or maybe there was that. But then when I started writing, what was interesting is that after doing all that work visualizing this space, I didn't get into it until the last sentence and a half. I did everything. I did everything. It was like I was setting it up, and
yeah,
I never got there until like I quick got it in at the last minute.
There's something about that, like you have 60 seconds left, where I was like,
yeah, all those details. I got other details in, but but it was like they weren't the details that I'd focused on in the exercise.
Yeah, I'm always interested in like the kind of leap from like those kind of procedural questions that she asked to then what you do in the kind of free writing portion. I think sometimes doing all of that just kind of like procedural work like opens up another part of your brain where you can get to something else. I like that exercise because it's a really good reminder. Like, that's a 16-minute video of like how much you can actually do in a pretty short period of time. Like, you don't have to have 4 hours to sit down and do your writing. Like, you could open up that video and in 16 minutes, like really get something that's potentially like interesting and surprising that you could keep going with. Certainly that's true with free writing generally, or other kinds of prompts. I just especially like that structure, especially for things where you're like, I want to write about this, but I'm not sure that I really have enough detail to really pull those things back out. I'm going to go back to screen sharing, and I'm going to try, I think we can do it. I'm going to try to move us into like our next two sections. So that was focused on the idea of retrieval and thinking about how we can pull up memories that are in our brain, but maybe not super accessible. The next thing that I want to think about is the idea of research. I really love using maps as a way of, actually, no, we're not going to do this one. This one I'm going to offer as like a thing to take with you, which is making a map as a kind of retrieval method. So actually drawing out, and this doesn't have to be fancy, like I am not a good artist, but actually making a visual either of like a route to some place you would have gone, or sketching a room or a small place. I think that sometimes switching to a visual medium can be a good way of unlocking things that maybe you didn't know were there. Because if you have to like draw your childhood bedroom, that forces you to ask questions about like, where was the window? Where is the door? In a way that you might not otherwise. So you can take that one with you. Now we're going to move on to research. I really love actual research trips, but oftentimes you can't actually go to a place that you want to write about for various reasons. I really like using Google Maps as a way of like exploring and kind of getting my brain back into places. I should say I'm a poet and a nonfiction writer, so I've used this for those genres. I think if you're a fiction writer, that this could also be really useful to like enter a space, and maybe also to enter a space that you've never been to or like can't get to. And you can use Google Maps. I found really useful. You can toggle between views. You can like open up other people's photos to try to remember what things look like. I really like actually like kind of following the route on Google Maps, so I can try to like walk or drive or bus ride the route that I would have taken in a part of my life. I have a little example here. So this is near where I used to live when I lived in Madison. I would take, when I would go to campus, I would take the bus, this route right up East Johnson. You can see where all the bus stops are. And this is also a route where I used to walk with my older son all the time when he was a really little baby. And so this is something that I've been writing about. And so I did a lot of Google Maps walking and bus riding down this map, and then also looking at the images of the actual places and trying to look at it through different parts of the year as well to think about that. So I want to give us a little bit of time now to take your own Google Maps research trip to a place that is interesting or important to you. So let's take about 10 minutes to dive into a place that is relevant somehow to something that you're working on. Is that enough direction to get started? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to mute myself so that I can click around quietly. If you feel like you want more direction or if you have questions, feel free to ask me in the chat. But let's take about 10 minutes to do our own very mini Maps research trip. let's come back together and get to a place where you can pause your research trip wherever you are. This is, I think, a kind of technique that works best when you're trying to reorient yourself to a place and you have maybe specific questions about kind of where things were or how you would have moved from one place to another. One limitation of Google Maps, of course, is that it's showing us now versus then. So I was spending a little bit of time being a little bit like wistful, looking at my old neighborhood, being like, oh, look at all those cool things that are there. Which is not necessarily helpful for my research project, but it is helpful to be just like reoriented in space and time, since I can't actually go back there right now. Any reflections on that? Anything that was helpful for you, or are there parts of your project where you feel like you could see a kind of virtual research trip like that being useful?
I don't know where exactly. I was thinking about where my mom grew up on a farm, and it's like I don't know where that was, but I think I could probably figure it out, and it was cool to look back. I just kind of looked at the town, and my grandma had lived there, and it was kind of neat to see, and a very cool device, even if it's for fiction purposes. It could be like, let's just pick a small town in the Midwest and see what that's like. So
yeah. Is that the place that you're writing about? Is it a place that you've spent time as well, or is it not a place you're familiar with?
I went there once, and the farmhouse was abandoned. So I don't even know if the building still, like if the structure still exists. But I have an image of it in my mind, so I feel like I might recognize it if I saw it.
Yeah. I think those kind of like shadow images are so interesting, right? Like you have I've spent a fair amount of time like Google Maps searching the small town that my grandmother lived in, where I did spend a fair amount of time as a kid, but always as a kid. And it's so different looking at like where streets actually are, getting that aerial map view versus like my lived experience of the place. It's very disorienting, but in a way that feels kind of productive. So I want to spend just a minute highlighting a couple of other research strategies that you can use. So we talked about maps. I also really love using photos and thinking about not just like what's in the photo, but what's outside of it. What doesn't it capture? What's the story? I really love, if folks know this poem, the Sharon Olds poem, I Go Back to May 1937, which is not explicitly, it's like she's imagining going back to her parents, and if she could kind of step into that moment and speak to them. And I think that could be an interesting way of getting into a moment that maybe you don't fully have access to. And you could also just think about like what questions that image raises for you. I have a lot of family photos, not a lot. I have a small number and a weird selection of family photos that one of my cousins gave me. And it's everything from like when we were in college to like when our mothers were very small. And so there's a lot of photos where I'm like, who is that old lady holding that baby? And who is that baby? And like, just kinds of things like that. And some of which are answerable, right? I've like gone to my mom and been like, who do you think this was? But some of them are a little unanswerable. Like, what was the occasion here? Why do I think my grandfather was looking like that? So I have some photos here. This one over here is me and my first son when he was a little tiny baby, as you can see. And then on the one on the right is one of these mysterious family photos. This is in my grandmother's house. My grandfather is a very young man. I think this is my mom. In this like party dress, and it just feels to me like this kind of weird time capsule of like the late 50s and like a party dress, men in suits and a bow tie, like sitting and smoking inside the house. It just feels like wild to me, and really like a kind of pastime. So it's something that I've tried to write into, and you can take those questions with you if writing from photos feels useful. Another more kind of like conventionally researchy tip is using newspapers and Wikipedia. I really like Wikipedia as just kind of like a starting point, honestly, for research. I know that's not serious research, and I do a lot of like very rigorous research, but Wikipedia can be a way of just kind of getting started and like orienting yourself, especially in a time that is not your time or a time that you do not remember. And trying to think about like what was happening in this time, what music would have been on the radio, like what were people talking about. Chronicling America is a really great website that's through the Library of Congress, so anyone can get access to it. And so you can see newspapers just to get a sense of like what was happening in that time. And you probably can get like the specific local newspaper of the city or town you're writing about. Or you could just look at like generally, like in the year that your grandmother was born, kind of what was happening in the world, what were the newspaper stories. I wrote this poem called The Thing, just to show you, and this did start with some Wikipedia research, in part because I was thinking about the movie The Thing, which is a great movie, but also the year 1982 and what was happening in that year, in addition to that movie coming out. All right, we've got Chronicling America there. Okay, and I want to shift in our last little bit of time together to this kind of big question, like the things we really can't know. What do we do then? Either because those memories are just totally gone, or the people who might have been able to tell you are gone, or won't talk to you about it, or whatever the case might be. Those mysterious things. So one passage or one approach is this idea of perhapsing, and this comes from an essay by Lisa Knopp. That you can use perhapsing or other kinds of phrases like perhapsing, and you can see there's a bunch of examples here, as a way to imagine yourself into a moment. So if there are things that you can't know, you can speculate. We'll talk about split toning. So let's spend a couple of minutes. I know we're running close to our time, but let's use the last couple of minutes for some writing. So find a place, and you might go back to the writing you did with Linda Berry at the very beginning, or you just might think like in your own writing, what are the things that you feel like you're not going to be able to know? And let's take a couple of minutes and write through using this technique of perhapsing, to say like I may never know, where that farmhouse was, but perhaps it was here. I won't know what what color the kitchen was, perhaps, and then you can imagine yourself into that world. So let's take about 5 minutes. Think of a thing that you just aren't going to be able to know or recover, and let's take about 5 minutes and perhaps yourself back into it. If you could pause where you are. We are just about at the end of our time. The other technique that's in the slides is the technique of split toning, which comes from another essay. These are both from Brevity, which I think is a great source for craft essays about nonfiction. And this is an essay by Gwendolyn Edward that kind of extends the idea of perhapsing into split toning, which means using like distinctly different tones as a way of going from signaling like I'm going from the factual to the imaginary. And that essay, which is linked in the slides, has some really great examples from Elisa Washuta, where she's using like medical records and then like kind of spinning out into some really beautiful kind of lyrical places from there. We're going to close out, and I know that we've got some official words from Blue Stoop to close us out, but I would just love for you all to take a minute in your notebook and record for yourself anything that was especially helpful, anything that you know you want to go back to, like star, highlight, to make some notes for yourself before we go, anything that you know you want to be able to use and kind of continue to build on. I'll put those slides in the chat one more time in case anybody wants to be able to look at them later. If you had fun today, I hope you did. I think you would also love my newsletter, which is in the chat. It's Write More, Be Less Careful. It is free and will always be free. If anyone has any, and again, I should give it back to Jordan, but if any, yay, I'm so glad. Thank you, Rowan. If anyone wants to share maybe in the chat anything that was useful today or any additional techniques that you have for pulling up memories, doing research for your creative writing, writing into what you can't know, that would be great. Okay, I will turn it back to you though, Jordan. And if folks want to say anything in the chat, you'd be welcome to do that now.
Awesome. Thank you again to Nancy Reddy and to everyone who participated in today's session. I'm about to share a few links in the chat where you can learn more about Blue Stoop programs and participate in a brief survey about today's session. I've also shared a link to next week's session, which is Breaking for Beauty, Line Breaks in the Dancing Poem with Sarah Browning. You can register for that. Yeah, thank you again. Take care and have a good rest of your week.
Glad to see you all.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So glad to see you, Ellie. All right, I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for organizing us and being in charge of the chat.
Anytime.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye. 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 Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Bye.